Every curse my best friend Julia uttered would come true. When I had a high fever during military training and asked for leave, she worriedly touched my forehead, but she turned around and whispered to her friend, "I really hope she burns into an idiot, so she won't keep hanging around me all the time." As soon as she finished speaking, my body temperature soared to 42 degrees, directly frying my brain. Afterwards, I became a fool. I called home to ask for living expenses. And she was extremely jealous that my family had money. She silently wished in her heart, "I hope her family goes bankrupt immediately, so she can taste what it's like to have no money." The next second, my dad cried on the phone, saying the company had gone bankrupt and the family was saddled with huge debts. Foolishly losing my source of income, I ended up starving to death, until the day I died. I couldn't understand what deep-seated grudge she held against me. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the day I fell ill with a fever during military training, but Julia didn't know that this time, I had gained the ability to reflect all curses back with double the force. In the infirmary, the smell of disinfectant filled the air. I had been brought in due to heatstroke. With a cold, damp towel placed on my forehead, Julia sat by my bedside, holding my hand tightly, her eyes red and swollen. "Valerie, how are you feeling? It's all my fault for not making you drink more water." Her voice was filled with self-blame, and she acted it out perfectly. I closed my eyes, feeling the waves of dizziness in my head. In my previous life, it was from this point that my life plunged into the abyss. Why hasn't she fainted yet? So delicate, she might as well just go into shock and never wake up. A sinister voice echoed in my mind, "Here it comes." I abruptly opened my eyes. That familiar, soul-sucking chill surged through me once more, but this time, the force swirled within me before bursting out with an even more formidable power. "I am perfectly fine." Instead, it was Julia beside me who suddenly let out a cry of alarm. She clutched her chest, her face instantly turning as pale as paper, and her breathing became rapid. I feel terrible. I can't catch my breath." She hadn't finished speaking when her eyes rolled back, and she slid straight down from the chair. The teacher in the infirmary was startled and rushed over immediately. "Hurry. Hurry, this student is in shock. Get her to the emergency room right away." I propped myself up on my arms and sat up, watching the chaotic scene with a cold gaze. Julia was lifted onto the stretcher, her lips already turning a bluish purple. "Shock." I softly repeated the word, a faint, unnoticed sneer curling at the corner of my mouth. "Julia, your curse has been returned to you. It's double the amount." Julia stayed in the hospital for 3 days. The diagnosis was sudden cardiogenic shock, and she almost didn't make it. When she returned, she looked much more haggard, and her gaze toward me was filled with curiosity and confusion. I was sitting at the desk, wiping down the limited edition sneakers my dad had someone bring back from abroad. The pure white upper shimmered softly under the light. Julia's gaze fell on those shoes, envy creeping into her eyes like vines. "Valerie, those shoes are really beautiful. They must be expensive, right?" she asked as if by chance. I nodded. "It's fine, my dad gave it to me." The smile on her face froze for a moment. "What's there to show off? It's just a pair of worn-out shoes. I hope they get stained with ink that can never be washed off. Then let's see how she wears them." The malicious thought resurfaced once more. My wiping motion came to a sudden halt. The next second, another girl in our dormitory, Kathy, let out a scream. "Ah, my fountain pen." She had just risen from her desk when her elbow accidentally knocked over the ink bottle on the table. The newly purchased black ink traced a precise parabola through the air. It wasn't aimed at my shoes. Instead, it landed squarely and completely on the white leather bag Julia had placed by the bed. That bag was something she saved up 3 months' worth of living expenses to buy, and just yesterday she was proudly showing it off to us. The ink quickly seeped into the leather, spreading into a large, glaring black stain. Kathy was terrified and kept apologizing. I'm sorry, Julia, I didn't mean to." Julia stared blankly at her bag, her lips trembling, unable to utter a single word. I put down my shoes, walked over, and picked up the ruined bag. "Stop wiping. It's soaked in, it won't come out. The school is hosting a welcome party, and each department is selecting performances. I signed up for a solo dance. In my previous life, I was an excellent dancer and could have shone brightly in university with this talent, but because I became a fool, I couldn't even coordinate my limbs, let alone dance." Julia also signed up and participated in the selection with me. She stood backstage, watching me change into a beautiful dance dress, her eyes filled with unconcealed envy. "Valerie, you look so beautiful, like a princess." She complimented me with a smile, but her hands were secretly clenched behind her back. It was my turn to take the stage, the spotlight shone on me, the music started, and I danced gracefully to the rhythm. Below, seated at the judges' table, was the student council president, Simon. His expression was focused, his gaze cool and distant, someone I felt was beyond reach in both this life and the last. I could feel Julia's venomous gaze piercing my back like needles. Jump, jump with all your might. I hope you break your leg right in front of the entire school, so you can never set foot on stage again in this lifetime. The curse arrived as expected. A sinister force attempted to wrap around my ankle. I merely paused imperceptibly underfoot while spinning. That force was instantly rebounded back. I perfectly executed the final move, and thunderous applause erupted from the audience. I bowed and left the stage, passing Julia, who was about to go on. Her gaze was filled with disbelief. She couldn't understand why I was completely unharmed. She stepped onto the stage, and the lights came on. She had just struck the first opening pose when something seemed to trip her up underfoot. Ah! A sharp cry of pain. She fell to the ground in an extremely contorted posture. The crisp sound of bone cracking echoed through the entire auditorium via the microphone. Everyone gasped in shock. Staff rushed onto the stage as Julia clutched her calf, writhing in pain on the floor. Her face drained of color. My leg is broken. Medical staff quickly arrived and made a preliminary diagnosis of a tibial fracture, requiring immediate surgery. I stood in the wings, watching her face contorted with excruciating pain and resentment as she was carried away. Simon, the student council president, rose from the judges' table and paused briefly as he passed by me. He glanced at me, then looked in the direction where Julia was being carried away, his brow slightly furrowed. She seemed to glare at you before she went on stage. His voice was low, carrying a hint of inquiry. I met his gaze, my expression calm. Really, I didn't notice. Simon didn't say anything more and turned to leave, but I know he's already become suspicious. One coincidence is just a coincidence, 2 or 3, and it becomes suspicious. Julia lay in the hospital for half a month. Her leg had a steel pin inserted, requiring at least 3 months of rest, so she naturally couldn't attend the welcome party. Meanwhile, because of that dance, I became a campus celebrity. That day, my parents came to see me. They drove a flashy black Bentley and parked it right under the dormitory building, drawing countless curious glances. My mom held my hand, asking about my well-being. My dad unloaded one luxury shopping bag after another from the trunk. Valerie, I was worried you might not be eating well at school, so I brought you some bird's nest and sea cucumber, and this bag. Didn't you say you liked it last time? I bought it for you. Got enough money to spend? If not, I'll transfer you some more. It was a happiness that made others envious. Julia, leaning on a crutch, limped in from outside just in time to witness this scene. She stood not far away, watching my parents shower me with meticulous care and attention. Seeing the luxury items she had always dreamed of effortlessly fall into my hands, her face, under the lingering glow of the sunset, appeared particularly gloomy. After my parents left, I took my things back to the dormitory. Julia followed me in as well. She sat on her own bed, remaining silent for a long time before finally speaking in a tone that seemed to suppress something. Valerie, your parents are so good to you. Not like my parents, they always think I'm useless. Never as good as anyone else. She started playing the victim, her usual trick. I absent-mindedly hummed in agreement while tidying up my things. Seeing my indifferent reaction, she changed the subject. Speaking of which, do you remember the physics competition in our second year of high school? My heart tightened. Here it comes. In my previous life, she had used this fabricated grudge as her reason for cursing my family to bankruptcy. I pretended to think for a moment. I don't remember. Why? Julia's eyes instantly turned red. How could you not remember? Her voice grew sharp. That day was supposed to be me competing in the finals. Your parents pulled some strings and took my spot. Do you know how important that award was to me? You ruined it, Valerie. You've destroyed my life. She cried out with tears streaming down her face, as if she had suffered an immense injustice. But I clearly remember that year, during the physics competition. I didn't even attend because of acute gastroenteritis, and she was eliminated in the preliminary round. The so-called me taking her spot is nothing but a lie she made up in her own mind, a lie that allows her to feel justified in being jealous of me and hating me. I looked at her, my gaze icy cold. Julia, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't just say whatever you want. My calmness completely infuriated her. She stood up with her cane, pointed at me, trembling all over with anger. You're still pretending. You're just a thief. You stole my life. The resentment in her eyes almost seemed to materialize. Why does she have everything? Why is her family so wealthy? If I'm not doing well, she shouldn't be either. I curse her family to go bankrupt immediately, may their company collapse, their debts exceed their assets, and force her parents to beg on the streets. The most vicious curse, carrying all her resentment, surged forth. That power was stronger than ever before. Almost causing the air to freeze, it charged at me, then was doubled back by my body. My phone on the table remained completely still. The next second, Julia's phone rang sharply. She instinctively answered, and from the other end of the line came her mother's heart-wrenching cries. "Julia, something terrible has happened. Your dad owes the bank hundreds of millions. It's over, our family is completely ruined." Julia's face instantly drained of all color. Her hand holding the phone trembled like a leaf in the autumn wind. "No, it can't be, how could this happen?" On the other end of the phone, her mother's sobbing continued. "Your dad, he couldn't handle the shock and jumped from his office window. He's in the hospital now, being resuscitated. The doctor said, even if he survives, he'll be bedridden for the rest of his life." Clatter, the phone slipped from her hand, fell to the ground, and the screen shattered. Julia's legs gave way, and she collapsed to the floor, her crutch rolling away to the side. Her gaze was vacant, and she was muttering to herself, "Bankruptcy, jumping off a building, isn't that exactly what she just cursed me with? Why on earth?" She suddenly raised her head, staring at me with eyes full of fear, resentment, and endless confusion. I slowly walked up to her, crouched down, and picked up her phone. Looking at her, I spoke clearly, word by word. "Julia, look, karma has arrived." News of Julia's family spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the school within a single day. Her father was also implicated in a massive economic crime, making headlines in the local news. Overnight, Julia became the daughter of a debt-ridden criminal. She took a long leave of absence and never returned to the dormitory. I heard that her mother sold everything of value in the house just to barely scrape together her father's medical expenses, and she herself, unable to afford tuition, was at risk of being expelled from school. That day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Julia calling. Her voice was hoarse and weak, carrying a desperate, all-consuming hatred. "Valerie, it was you, wasn't it? My family ended up like this because of your schemes." I let out a light laugh. "Julia, your father got what he deserved." "You're lying," she screamed. "It must be you. What kind of sorcery did you use? My leg is broken, my family is bankrupt, all because of you." Her logic remains as laughable as ever. "Always blame others for your own mistakes. I don't have that much time to indulge your madness." I'm about to hang up the phone. "Valerie, don't hang up," she cried out urgently. "Come out and meet me, at the Lover's Lake behind the school. Let's get this straight." Her tones suddenly became unusually calm, but I could hear the madness suppressed beneath that calm. "Of course I know what she's up to. She has nothing left. She was going to place her final bet on the most vicious curse, and I am waiting for her." "Okay," I agreed. In the evening, I came alone to Lover's Lake. The wind by the lake was strong, making it feel quite chilly. Julia stood under the willow tree by the lake, looking even more haggard than the last time I saw her. She wore old clothes washed to a pale hue, her face devoid of any color, save for those eyes, bright and startling, sharp as knives. She wasn't using a cane, but her stance still seemed somewhat unsteady. "You're here," she said, looking at me with a strange smile. "What do you want to say?" I asked. "Valerie, I really envy you," she replied, avoiding the question. "You have everything, a beautiful face, a privileged family background, and everyone's affection, and me, I have nothing left." Her voice grew softer, yet more venomous. "Why, it's not fair, so, I want you to give it all back to me." She slowly approached me, a crazed glint flashing in her eyes. "No, I don't want anything from you, I only want you, just like me, to end up with nothing. I curse you, Valerie, may you be disfigured, betrayed by the one you love most, abandoned by all, and in the end, may you jump into this lake alone and miserable, with your bones never to be found." This was the curse she poured all her resentment into. That black force, like a giant venomous snake, opened its bloody maw and lunged at me. I closed my eyes, feeling that power being absorbed by my body, transformed, and then returned with the force of a thunderbolt, twice as strong. Boom! It was as if a clap of thunder exploded beside my ear. I opened my eyes. Julia stood right in front of me, her expression frozen. She reached out in disbelief, touching her own face. On her face, deep red scars were rapidly appearing, as if branded by a hot iron, grotesque and terrifying. "Ah," She let out a scream that sounded inhuman, rushed to the lakeside, and stared at her reflection in the water. That face was completely ruined. Just then, her phone rang. It was her boyfriend calling. She answered with trembling hands, and a cold, disgusted voice came from the other end of the line. Julia, let's break up. Your father is a criminal. I could never marry you. Don't bother me anymore. And besides, I've had enough of you for a long time. Beep, beep, beep. The phone was mercilessly hung up. No, Julia collapsed on the ground, murmuring to herself, disfigured, betrayed by the one she loved most. The curses were coming true one by one, and in double measure. Her last pillar of support had also crumbled. She raised her head, her bloodshot eyes fixed on me with a gaze that held nothing but pure madness and a desire for destruction. Valerie, it's you, you're the one who ruined me. I'm going to kill you, she roared, like a frenzied beast, and lunged at me. She wanted to push me into the lake. I simply shifted my body slightly and dodged, but she had used too much force and couldn't stop herself, plunging headfirst into the lake. Splash, water splashed everywhere. She struggled and screamed in the icy lake water. Help, help me. Several students walking by the lake heard the sound and gathered around. Among them was the student council president, Simon. He saw Julia struggling in the lake, then looked at me standing coldly on the shore, his expression instantly turning complicated. What happened? He asked me. I didn't have time to answer. Julia in the lake suddenly stopped struggling. Her body, as if being pulled down by something, rapidly sank. On the lake surface, only ripples spreading in circles remained. Not a single bone was left. The final curse had also come to pass upon herself. Everyone was stunned. Simon's gaze slowly shifted from the lake's surface to my face. He said nothing, but his eyes seemed to have seen through everything. Julia's disappearance was classified as an accidental drowning. The police searched the lake for 3 days but found nothing. She vanished into thin air, not even leaving a trace of her clothing behind. This incident caused quite a stir at school, but it was soon replaced by new gossip. Life returned to its peaceful state. I remained the radiant Valerie, however. Simon's gaze towards me was becoming increasingly different. He always seemed to bump into me on various occasions, in the library, in the cafeteria, on the way to the piano room. He was no longer the aloof student council president. Instead, he seemed more like a stalker. That day, I was practicing the piano in the music room when he pushed the door open and walked in. You don't seem afraid of me at all. He stood before me, his tall figure casting a shadow. I stopped playing and looked up at him. Why should I be afraid of you? I was there the day Julia had the accident, he said. I saw how she rushed toward you and then fell into the lake herself. I also know that before that, her leg was broken, and her family was in debt, and every time something happened to her, you were there. He pressed forward step by step, his gaze sharp as a knife, as if trying to slice open my soul. Valerie, who exactly are you? I looked at him and suddenly laughed. Simon, do you believe that there are curses in this world? He was stunned. I stood up, walked over to him, and looked directly into his eyes. There is a kind of person whose resentment can turn into reality. Whoever she wishes misfortune upon will be struck by misfortune, and I paused, my smile turning cold and dangerous, happened to be her nemesis. Simon's pupils contracted sharply. He was clearly shocked by my words. A prodigy who had received over a decade of materialist education suddenly heard such a worldview-shattering statement and found it difficult to digest for a moment. You don't believe me? I raised an eyebrow. Then let's make a bet. Let's bet that the next unlucky person will be the vice president of the student council, Rita. Rita was Julia's only friend in the student council, and she was also a two-faced character. After Julia's incident, she not only showed no sympathy but immediately kicked her while she was down, spreading the scandal about Julia's family everywhere, as if afraid others wouldn't know she had cut ties with Julia. Simon frowned. Do you have a grudge against her? No. I shook my head. I just don't like her, that's all. Of course, I wouldn't tell him that I had overheard Rita talking bad about me with others. Valerie is nothing but a rich girl with a few stinking coins. What's there to be so arrogant about? I hope she gets hit by a car when she goes out, ends up a vegetable, and then we'll see how she keeps up that attitude. This is Rita's blessing, and I am more than happy to help her make it come true. It's just that the target needs to be changed. Within 3 days, I held up 3 fingers and waved them in front of Simon. Rita will be in a car accident and become a vegetable. If I lose, I'll tell you everything you want to know. If I win. I leaned in close to him and whispered softly in his ear, you'll have to keep my secret. The warm breath brushed against the shell of his ear, and Simon's body stiffened slightly, his ears visibly turning red. He took a step back, putting some distance between us, and looked at me with a complicated expression. After a long while, he finally managed to squeeze out a single word from his throat. Okay, the bet was on. Although Simon agreed verbally, the doubt and scrutiny in his eyes did not diminish in the slightest. He began to protect Rita without drawing attention. He arranged a large amount of indoor work for Rita in the name of the student union, reducing her opportunities to go out. Even when she occasionally needed to go out, he would personally drive her there and back. Rita was overwhelmed by the favor, thinking that her spring had arrived. And she spent all day in the dormitory boasting about how the student union president treated her differently. I watched coldly from the sidelines, saying nothing. Once the gears of fate begin to turn, how can mere human effort stop them? The rebound of a curse never lies. On the afternoon of the third day, the student council was to hold an emergency meeting. Rita, dressed to the nines, sat in the passenger seat, constantly trying to strike up conversations with Simon. Simon drove the car. His mind wandering, all his attention was focused on observing the surroundings, fearing that an out-of-control truck might suddenly rush out. However, the journey was smooth and uneventful. The car came to a steady stop under the administrative building of the school. Simon turned off the engine, and his anxious heart finally settled a bit. It seems I was overthinking it. What curse? It was just Valerie playing tricks. Rita unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed the door open to get out of the car. She stood by the car, flashing what she believed to be her most charming smile at Simon inside. Chairman, thank you for the ride. Just then, no one could have anticipated, on the top floor of the administration building, a massive billboard used for exterior decoration suddenly had its securing screws come loose. That piece of iron sheet, weighing hundreds of pounds, came crashing down with a howling wind. Be careful. Simon's pupils contracted sharply, and he instinctively cried out in alarm. But it was all too late. Bang, a loud crash. The smile on Rita's face froze forever. She didn't even have time to let out a scream before her entire body was crushed beneath the massive billboard. Blood gushed frantically from the gaps in the metal sheet, staining the ground red. Simon sat dazedly in the car, his entire body cold. He watched Rita, right before his eyes, being smashed to a bloody pulp. And all of this happened with only 10 minutes left until the 3-day deadline Valerie had mentioned. It wasn't a car accident, but the outcome was exactly the same. After being taken to the hospital, the doctor said that although Rita had survived, she had become a vegetable due to severe head trauma. The chances of her waking up were extremely slim. Simon stood in the hospital corridor, the words I had spoken in the piano room that day echoing in his mind. Within 3 days, Rita will be in a car accident and become a vegetable. No, it's more precise than that, because Rita's inner thoughts were, I hope she gets hit by a car when she goes out and becomes a vegetable. And the billboard falling from the sky, like being hit by a car, is essentially an unexpected heavy blow, encountered while going out. A curse will only manifest in the most effective, most unavoidable way. Simon's phone rang. It was my call. His hand trembling, he pressed the answer button. On the other end of the line, my voice was calm, without a single ripple. Simon, I won. Now, do you believe me? Simon didn't answer my question. He just remained silent for a long time, so long that I thought he had already hung up the phone. Then, I heard him say in an extremely dry voice, Valerie, what exactly do you want? I laughed. What I want has always been very simple, from beginning to end. I just want those who have hurt me to pay the price they deserve. Julia is, and so is Rita. Simon, there are many bad people in this world, and my ability is to make the venom they speak with their own mouths come back to haunt them. Isn't that a form of fairness? On the other end of the phone, there was another long silence. Help me find all the people like Julia and Rita. The student council is your best source of information, isn't it? Simon understood what I meant. He was the student council president, the most well-informed person in the school, who has conflicts with whom? Who spoke ill of whom behind their back? No one knows better than him. Valerie, I'll help you, but you must also promise me one thing. What? Don't put yourself in danger again. His voice carried a hint of concern that was hard to detect. I paused for a moment, then let out a light chuckle. Don't worry, I won't, because from now on, I am no longer the prey, I am the hunter. After hanging up the phone, I walked to the window and gazed at the brightly lit campus outside. In this second life, I refuse to be that fool who was at the mercy of others. All those who have hurt me, all those who harbor ill will toward me, will have nowhere to hide. Julia is just the beginning. Next, I will make them taste, one by one, the bitter fruits of their own actions, As for Simon, I recall his slightly reddened ears and those words of concern. Perhaps, in this lifetime, besides revenge, there might be some unexpected surprises. Simon's addition has made my path to revenge even more powerful. He used his authority as the student council president to quietly gather information about those who gossiped about and slandered me behind my back. His efficiency was remarkable. Soon, a list was placed before me. All the names on it were familiar. Some were classmates, others were students from different departments. I picked up the list and lightly touched one of the names with my fingertip, Lisa. She was a broadcaster at the school radio station, with a sweet voice and always appearing gentle and harmless in front of others. In private, she is a gossip, most fond of seizing on rumors and spreading them. In my previous life, after I became a fool, she often used subtle innuendos in the broadcasts to imply that I was mentally unstable, making me the laughingstock of the entire school. That fool Valerie is such bad luck. She's always babbling nonsense in the dorm. I wish her throat would rot so she could never make a sound again. This was the most malicious curse in her heart as I passed by her. I heard it at the time, but there was nothing I could do. Now, it's time for her to get a taste of her own medicine. I circled Lisa's name. Simon watched my movements, his brow twitching almost imperceptibly. Did she offend you? He asked. Not exactly an offense, I said lightly. It's just that she likes to gossip behind people's backs. I think she should learn to keep her mouth shut. Simon didn't say anything more, just gave me a deep look. I didn't tell him about Lisa's inner thoughts. I just wanted to see how he would react when he witnessed the fulfillment of one curse after another with his own eyes. The next day, I deliberately waited for Lisa at the entrance of the broadcasting station. When she saw me, a fake smile spread across her face. Valerie, what a coincidence. Are you here for the broadcasting station too? Unfortunately, I looked straight into her eyes. I came specifically to find you. The smile on her face froze for a moment. Find me, she said, somewhat guiltily. What's the matter? Nothing major. I leaned closer to her and lowered my voice. I just wanted to remind you to be careful with your words. Lisa's face instantly turned pale. She didn't know what I was referring to, but my gaze sent a chill through her from the inside out. What is this lunatic trying to do? I wish she would disappear from my sight right now. Better yet, may she be haunted by something filthy, never to find peace in the afterlife. Her inner voice echoed once more. This time, the target of the curse was herself. I smiled and turned to leave. That afternoon, the school radio station suddenly emitted a sharp, piercing static noise. Then, the program hosted by Lisa came to an abrupt halt. The teacher in charge of the radio station rushed in and found Lisa clutching her throat, her face pale and unable to speak. Her vocal cords had suddenly lost their voice. After the doctor's examination, the diagnosis was severe vocal cord damage, possibly due to a viral infection or overuse of the voice. In any case, she would be unable to speak for a short period of time. Lisa's broadcasting career came to an end just like that. What was even more bizarre was that she had a nightmare in her dormitory that very night. She dreamed of being entangled by an invisible, dirty thing, her entire body cold and unable to move. After being startled awake, she had a persistent high fever, was listless, and seemed completely out of sorts. Everyone in the dorm said she seemed scared out of her wits. Simon sent me a text message. Lisa has lost her voice and is running a high fever. I replied to him, as expected. My path of revenge has come to an end, but my journey has only just begun. I still have many things to do. I will use my abilities to help those who are truly in need. I want to make this world a fairer place. This time, I will live my most brilliant self. After hearing the first story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Next, there is another similar story. Let's continue to see. The nanny's daughter and I are bound by a score-swapping system. I wrote with great speed and skill in the exam hall, only to find my total score was 250. In my previous life, the nanny's daughter swapped my exam scores. She went to Yale University with great fanfare, but I ended up with a big fat 0, abandoned by my father and cyberbullied by the entire internet. The nanny's daughter mocked me relentlessly. Hey, isn't this the top student? So your grades were all copied, huh? It's fine if you can't get into college, just find a man to marry. My dad married me off to a business partner with supermasculinity, and I was abused to death. After being reborn, I'm completely letting go and living recklessly. If you want to get into Yale University, go roast sweet potatoes instead. Sister, can you lend me a pen? Tiffany stood in front of me, speaking with a pitiful tone. At that moment, I suddenly could hear Tiffany's inner thoughts. as long as that fool Molly lends me her pen. I can bind with her and swap her college entrance exam scores. I smiled faintly and handed my gel pen to Tiffany. It's yours. Tiffany looked innocent, but in her heart, she was already cursing my ancestors for 18 generations. That fool Molly, so easily got her hands on her things. Fool, you're dead for life. Watching Tiffany leave my room, her retreating figure, I couldn't help but curl into a cold sneer. In my past life, it was also today, the nanny's daughter, Tiffany, walked into my room with a pitiful look, saying she wanted to borrow a pen from me. Little did I know, she had long been bound to an exchange system in her mind. As long as she obtained my belongings, she could exchange them for my college entrance exam scores. Originally, I had been the undisputed top student since childhood, from elementary school to middle school, and then to high school. I have always been ranked first in my grade, when doing past college entrance exam papers. I never scored below 700 points, whether it was the teachers at school or my parents. The only goal they set for me was to aim for Yale University, and Tiffany is the daughter of our family's nanny. She has always had average grades, with a total score hovering around 300 points. It's not that she is inherently dull, but rather that Tiffany is quite attractive. She often mingles with troublemakers from outside the school and gets into relationships, which has affected her academic performance. School teachers have repeatedly talked to her about it. They even spoke harshly and directly to her. Your mother is a nanny. You were originally a very smart girl. If you willingly let yourself go, how can you change your own fate? What, are you going to follow in your mother's footsteps and become a nanny in someone else's home in the future? But Tiffany completely ignored the teacher's words. She even made a bold declaration, saying she was naturally smart, just didn't like to study. If she put in even a day of effort, she'd definitely become the top scorer in the college entrance exam. At first, I thought she was just spouting nonsense after being mocked by the teacher, who would have thought she had a system bound to her all along, and she had long set her sights on me as the target for the exchange. In her previous life, Tiffany effortlessly scored 731 points by relying on the score-swapping system, becoming the top scorer in the entire province. Not only did she secure a place at Yale University, but she even took my father away from me. That's right, Tiffany's mother, who is our family's nanny Willa, turned out to be my father's former lover. Tiffany is even my father's illegitimate daughter, born to Willa outside the family. Because Tiffany became the top scorer in the province, my father acknowledged Willa and her daughter, allowing them to return to the family. In contrast, I, Tiffany, slept through the entire exam and handed in completely blank answer sheets. In the end, my college entrance exam score was a big fat 0, not even enough to get into LX technical school. My father was utterly disappointed in me, and Tiffany even posted online, claiming that my years of being a top student were all just a persona. Every single exam over the past decade, she said, was achieved by selling my looks and stealing the answers. Overnight, I became the laughingstock of everyone and was cyberbullied across the entire internet. My photos were even photoshopped to be naked and posted all over the internet. My father, feeling that I had brought shame upon him, and under Tiffany's instigation, actually gave me away to his business partner. The man was in his 50s, had been married 6 times, and was a perverted supermasculine type. I was chained up in the basement by that pervert, subjected to daily humiliation and torture, and in the end, I was brutally abused to death, and my own mother was even forced into a mental institution by Tiffany and her mother, subjected to daily electric shocks and medication. My mother lost her husband and then her daughter. She developed severe depression. In the end, my mother stood on the rooftop of the mental institution and jumped, recalling everything from my past life. My eyes seemed to burn with fury. I clenched my lower lip tightly, my heart filled with resentment. At this moment, Tiffany had already left my room. She stood at the door of my room, conversing with the system in her mind. The system presented its conditions. You have already bound with Molly and exchanged scores. If you fail, what price are you willing to pay? Pies don't fall from the sky. The system naturally has its own requirements, Tiffany said with conviction. I am willing to exchange my youth and beauty for it. Standing in the room, I narrowed my eyes slightly. Tiffany, everything you owed me in my past life, in this lifetime, I will make sure you repay it double. The next day at school, Tiffany was directly called into the teacher's office. She was too flamboyant at school, relying on her youthful beauty. She dated boys everywhere. Not only did she accept expensive gifts from male classmates, but she also took cash. She even dated delinquents from outside the school. She was caught on camera flirting with a yellow-haired troublemaker right at the school gate. In no time at all, Tiffany's roar echoed from the office. I've always been smart, I just don't like studying. If I put in just a few days of effort, I'm sure to be this year's top scorer in the college entrance exam. Tiffany deliberately provoked the teacher and made such a bold statement. The homeroom teacher shook her head repeatedly in anger, saying straight out that Tiffany was beyond saving. Many classmates gathered at the office door, watching the commotion inside. As for me, I couldn't be bothered to meddle in so much idle business. I grabbed a cushion, lay on my desk, and slept soundly. In no time at all, Tiffany emerged from the office, full of energy and vitality. She had countless admirers around her. Some boys brought her milk, while others brought her cakes. However, there were a few female classmates who couldn't stand Tiffany's behavior, rolling their eyes and sneering sarcastically. "Oh, isn't this the great child prodigy? How clever they are, scoring 200 points on every exam. They're definitely getting into a 985 university. Exactly, our miss just doesn't want to study. They can casually study for a few days and get into Yale University." Tiffany raised her chin proudly and strutted into the classroom. As a result, she spotted me at first glance. Drooling all over the desk while sleeping, Tiffany rushed toward me like a madwoman. "Molly, what are you doing?" She shook me awake desperately. "The college entrance exam is just around the corner, and we're in the final sprint. How can you be sleeping right now?" I opened my drowsy eyes and yawned a few times. "What does it matter to you if I sleep in class? After all, I always rank first in the entire school. No matter how much I sleep, my grades won't suffer." Tiffany's face was full of concern. "How can this be? You must stand firm at your last post. Molly, what if your performance declines now that you're slacking off?" I gave Tiffany a big eye roll, raised an eyebrow, and sneered. "Are you crazy? What does my performance have to do with you? You should mind your own business." At this moment, the other students in the class mocked even more vigorously. "Oh my goddess, Tiffany is really a street cop. She sure has a wide jurisdiction." Exactly. With her own score barely over 200, she dares to meddle with the top student. Who does she think she is? Just the daughter of the top student's family's nanny, isn't she? Oh my, our goddess Tiffany is a genius. She's going to be this year's top scorer in the college entrance exam. So what if she reaches out a bit? If she were to kick her legs, she might even kick her way into your bed. The classmates covered their mouths, chattering away, one after another. Tiffany hated it the most when people said she was the daughter of a nanny, but with so many classmates, she couldn't refute them one by one. Tiffany shot me a venomous glare before heading toward the back row. That very night, the moment I stepped through the front door, I saw Tiffany tearfully complaining to my dad. I really did it all for Molly's own good. At such a critical moment, she actually fell asleep in class. I just don't want my sister to go astray. At this moment, the nanny Willa was also standing in front of my father, with one arm around Tiffany's shoulder. She placed her other hand on my father's thigh. "Old Lynn, Tiffany is just naturally kind-hearted. When Molly comes back later, don't scold her either, just gently reprimand her a few times. Although Molly has always had good grades since she was little, she's just too cold-hearted. She's not close to you at all." Her own father. "If you say anything too harsh, I'm afraid that child will hold a grudge against you in her heart." This mother and daughter really know how to stir up trouble. Seeing me come in, my dad immediately shook his leg and pushed Willa's hand away. Willa turned her head and gave me an awkward smile. "Molly is back. The master has something to discuss with you. I'm going to start cooking now." As she spoke, Willa pulled Tiffany into the kitchen. At that moment, my dad was still putting on a stern face, pretending to be the big shot. I tossed my backpack onto the sofa and spoke directly. "It's about me sleeping in class, right? Lydia and Maya didn't do well on their exams. I helped them study last night. We stayed up a bit too late, so I dozed off for a while during self-study in class today. Lydia and Maya are both my best friends. Most importantly, their parents are big bosses. They are business partners with my dad. In recent years, my dad has made a small fortune by running a food factory. However, he isn't particularly well known in City A and still relies on influential connections for support. As soon as he heard that I was tutoring the daughters of those big bosses, my dad immediately beamed with joy. I always knew my Molly was amazing. It's just sleeping. What's the big deal? Molly, Dad believes in you. Do whatever you want to do. You're the most promising one in our family. This year's college entrance exam. Don't let Dad down." I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Since I was little, I've never been afraid of exams. Don't worry, getting into Yale University won't be a problem." I deliberately emphasized the words, Yale University. Tiffany stood in the kitchen, and upon hearing my words, she immediately gave Willa a cryptic look. In the blink of an eye, it was mealtime. Since my mom has been on a business trip out of town, there are only 4 of us at the dinner table. Me, my dad, Willa, and Tiffany. The table is fully loaded, all with seafood, braised prawns, steamed sea bass. But the thing is, I really don't like seafood. In fact, even the smell of fish and shrimp makes me want to vomit. The one who loves seafood is Tiffany. In her previous life, Willa cooked every meal according to Tiffany's preferences, and I was too soft-hearted, thinking that Tiffany was the daughter of a nanny and came from a single-parent family, which made her truly pitiful. So I thought it was just a few meals, and it didn't matter what we ate. Therefore, I never argued or complained about it. At this moment, I am sitting at the dining table, looking at the table full of fish, shrimp, and crab. I directly pick up a plate of braised yellow fish in sauce and pour it, along with the broth, straight into the trash. Aunt Wang, what do you mean by this? You know perfectly well that I don't like seafood, yet you turn the dining table into a seafood market every day. Are you deliberately picking a fight with me? I speak up first. At this moment, Willa stood beside me with a face full of grievance, frequently batting her eyes at my father. She pretended to be wronged and said, "Molly, I'm doing all this for your own good. Eating fish nourishes the brain, and aren't you about to take the college entrance exam? I just wanted to give you a little extra brain boost. Is this to nourish my brain, or to satisfy your daughter's cravings?" I let out a cold snort and pointed directly at Tiffany. Aunt Wang, if I remember correctly, I am the master of this house, you are the nanny, and Tiffany is your daughter, right? Now, you only cook what Tiffany likes to eat. When it comes to tidying up, you only clean Tiffany's room the most thoroughly. If it were an outsider, they'd think this family's surname was Smith, not Lin. Seeing me in a towering rage, Willa kept winking at my dad. Old Lin, look at Molly's temper. Always misunderstanding me. At this moment, I let out a cold snort. Can't even get a decent meal I want. What's the point of taking the exam? I might as well just drop out of school tomorrow. I probably won't even make it to the exam day. I'll starve to death at home before then. My father has always been someone who values face above all else. Having a top student for a daughter has earned him a lot of respect in the business world over the years. If I could get into Yale University, my father would gain even more fame. It might even take our family business to the next level. My father is selfish. He values whoever benefits him the most. As soon as I mentioned wanting to drop out of school, my dad was so angry that he slapped the table with his hand. Aunt Wang, you've really gone too far. You need to understand that Molly is the young lady of this household. Whatever she says goes. Quick, throw all these dishes away. Immediately make something light and simple. Something Molly likes to eat. From now on, seafood must never appear on our family's dining table. Upon hearing my father's command, Willa could only glare at me with a venomous look in her eyes. Then, she had to obediently go back to cooking again. At this moment, I once again heard the voice of Tiffany's system in her mind. System, Molly actually dares to target me. I want to make her suffer a miserable death. Quick, tell me, if I successfully swap Molly's grades, what punishment will she receive? The system's voice rang out. Host, as long as you can exchange your grades in the college entrance exam and successfully get into Yale University as you wish, then, Molly will lose 60 years of his lifespan and will die soon. So, the person whose grades are taken away will also face punishment. In my previous life, I was only 23 years old when I was tortured to death by that sick pervert. It seems I should at least be able to live into my 80s. It's only because I lost 60 years of my lifespan that I died young from abuse. Thinking of this, I met Tiffany's gaze. I deliberately gave her a provocative look, but since the college entrance exam hasn't happened yet, Tiffany doesn't dare to turn against me openly. Seeing Tiffany's expression of hating me to the core but unable to do anything about it, I couldn't help but feel like laughing inside. In the blink of an eye, the day of the college entrance exam arrived. In the examination hall, as soon as the test papers were handed out, I started writing furiously. What is the square root of 576, equivalent to a bastard? The chemical reaction of steel wire heating in the air. React your grandmother's leg. As for the college entrance exam essay, thoughts and reflections on the CE4 lunar exploration, I picked up the pen and wrote a few bold characters on the Chinese exam paper. My mistress mother, the college entrance exam essay is of utmost importance, so it must be written well. Deeply moving, with a smile that hides a knife, after finishing all the exams, I had already estimated my score in my mind, 250. the most fitting score for Tiffany. Out of the exam hall, Tiffany warmly pressed close to my side. Sister Molly, how did you do on the exam? Before the college entrance exam, I specifically asked the homeroom teacher. You gave up the school's recommendation qualification. If you don't do well, you might not even get into college. I raised my eyebrow slightly. How did I do on the exam? This year's test was so easy, even a pig could score 250. I've already estimated my score, at least 720, so Yale University are definitely within reach. Upon hearing my words, Tiffany could no longer conceal the joy in her heart. She made a bold statement. Is that so? What a coincidence. I also think this year's exam was easy. I've already estimated my score, and I think I can get 730, sister. It looks like I'm likely to be this year's top scorer in the college entrance exam. Tiffany told lies without even blushing. The corners of her mouth were still smeared with drool, a patch of white. She was clearly sleeping soundly in the exam hall, yet she had the audacity to boast that she was the top scorer in the college entrance exam. I casually replied, who will emerge victorious will be clear once the scores are out. After the exam, since my mom was still on a business trip out of town, I used the excuse of traveling to say I was going to another city. My father naturally wouldn't interfere with me. He was quite pleased to see me leave this home. After all, he could openly come and go with Willa and enjoy a loving father-daughter relationship with his illegitimate child. After arriving in another city, I finally got to see my mother. My mother's name is Dong Yuan, and she is a strong, capable woman. She is extremely driven in her career, yet when it comes to relationships, she is completely inexperienced. Over 20 years ago, my mother, who had always been busy with work and had never been in a relationship, was set up on a blind date by her family. That's how she met my father, who came from a rural background but had graduated from university. My father isn't bad looking, and although his family conditions weren't great, he at least had a bachelor's degree. My mother wasn't materialistic, and with her lack of dating experience, she was easily deceived by my father's sweet talk. Believing she had found true love, they got married in a grand and passionate ceremony. After the wedding, the couple started a business together. On the surface, my father was the chairman, but behind the scenes, most of the business was brought in by my mother. But what my mother didn't know was, my dad is simply a scumbag. Although he is indeed a college student, he is greedy for profit and forgets about righteousness, and his lust knows no bounds. Originally, my dad had a girlfriend in the countryside. That woman was Willa. When Willa was young, she was quite good-looking, considered the belle of the village. My father was the only college student in the village, and the two of them standing together made a perfect match, a talented man and a beautiful woman. But later, my grandmother looked down on Willa's poor family background, thinking she wasn't good enough for her son. Willa's family, on the other hand, demanded a large sum of money as a dowry. My father couldn't afford that much. Because of these reasons, the two chose to break up. After my father and Willa separated, Willa turned around and married a local troublemaker in the village named Bob. Meanwhile, my father was also going on blind dates all over the city. In the end, he took a liking to my mother for being naive and easy to deceive. Without paying a single cent in bride price, he tricked her into coming home with him. Who would have thought that after my father and Willa got married separately, the two of them still secretly carried on their affair. My father started cheating on the very day of his wedding. Every month, he used the excuse of returning to the countryside to visit my grandmother. Each time he left, he would be gone for 3 days. Actually, he specifically went back to have secret meetings with Willa. Later, the year my mother gave birth to me, Willa also became pregnant and had a daughter. Tiffany turned out to be only 3 months younger than me. Willa claimed that Tiffany was my father's child, saying that the husband she married was infertile, incapable in that aspect, and simply couldn't perform. Then, when I was 13 years old, Willa's husband, Bob, was arrested for causing injury due to drunken fighting and was sentenced to a full 10 years. Seeing her husband end up in jail, Willa immediately chose to divorce. Then she ran to my father, crying and pleading, demanding that he take responsibility for her and her daughter. That was when it all began. My dad brought Willa back home, saying she was the new nanny he had hired. As for Tiffany, she moved into our villa along with Willa. It was said she was to be my playmate. Willa and her daughter were as venomous as snakes and scorpions. They did their underground work quite well. I lived under the same roof with them for a full 5 years. If it weren't for the tragedy of my past life, I would never have known that Willa had actually been having an affair with my dad all along. Arrived in the city where my mom is on a business trip. It had been a long time since I last saw my mom. She had lost a lot of weight from running around for business. When she saw me, my mom cried with heartache, "Molly, Mom is sorry. I really couldn't get away. I couldn't even go back to be with you for your college entrance exams." I instantly threw myself into my mother's arms. "Mom, it's not your fault, it's all my fault. In this lifetime, I will never let you jump off a building again." My mother was startled by my words. "Molly, what are you talking about?" "There's nothing I need to hide from my mom." The two of us returned to the hotel room, and I told my mom everything about my experiences in my previous life and the fact that I had been reborn. After hearing it all, my mom was so furious that her teeth were practically itching. She knew that I was the only person in her life who would never deceive her. "Molly, are you saying that Willa is your father's mistress? Tiffany is actually your father's illegitimate daughter?" I nodded heavily. Immediately after, I took out a few small bags. Each pocket contained a few strands of hair. "Mom, these are the hairs I collected from Willa, Tiffany, and my dad. We can go get a DNA test done. Also, I think we shouldn't make this public just yet. After all, even if we get divorced, what's rightfully ours, mother and daughter, absolutely cannot be given away cheaply to those two vixens." My mom is a bit naive when it comes to matters of the heart. Back in the day, she was a top student from a 985 university. In her career, she was decisive and exceptionally intelligent. My mom nodded heavily. After hearing about my past life experiences, my mother and I reminisced for an entire night. Throughout the night, my mother alternated between crying and laughing. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she held me tightly in her arms, unwilling to let go for even a moment, from the end of the exams until the results were released. I stayed by my mother's side the entire time. The two of us were traveling out of town, enjoying delicious food and visiting scenic spots. We rode roller coasters. In the blink of an eye, the day to check our grades was almost here. My mom's business on her side had also wrapped up, and the two of us, mother and daughter, returned home together. After returning home, I had no idea how Willa and Tiffany had managed to win over my dad during this time. My mom and I had just stepped through the door when my dad announced loudly, "Did you know, Tiffany did really well on her exams this time. She said she's definitely going to get into Yale University, and she might even be the top scorer in our city for the province. I've decided, on the day the results come out, I'm going to host a few tables. We'll invite guests for a meal and check the results publicly, and that day, I also have something big to announce." I understand exactly what my father means by a big event. He definitely wants to give Willa a proper status and have Tiffany recognized as part of the family. On the same day, having a daughter who got into Yale University, and then acknowledging her identity, my father really wants to bask in the glory, but he hasn't considered my and my mother's feelings at all. In Sam Lin's eyes, who his wife is, who his children are, none of that matters. Only face, only fame and fortune are what he values most in this life. In the blink of an eye, the day of the results announcement arrived. My dad booked a large private room at the biggest hotel in our area. Inside, 4 large tables were set up. He invited many relatives, friends, and business partners. For a moment, glasses clinked and toasts were exchanged. My father raised his glass high and announced mysteriously to everyone, "In a moment, it will be time for the 2 children to check their exam results." As everyone knows, for many years, 2 girls have been living in our home. Molly has always been a top student since she was little. She is my own daughter, and Tiffany, the daughter of our housekeeper Willa, is also taking the college entrance exam this year. In a moment, when the children's results come out, there will be a particularly big piece of good news to announce to everyone. I hope you all look forward to it. My dad's old face flushed red from drinking. Meanwhile, Tiffany was also holding a wine glass. She deliberately leaned in close to me, winking mysteriously. "Molly, do you know what good news your dad is about to announce later?" I pretended to be taken aback. "How would I know?" Tiffany said mysteriously. "Don't worry, it's a big surprise, Molly. This surprise will definitely blow your mind." At this moment, I thought to myself, that's right, it's a big surprise. That score would absolutely shock everyone. Immediately after, my dad demanded that Tiffany and I check our scores publicly. I was the first to check my score. After I entered my exam number and student ID, the computer connected to the large screen in the private room, everyone present could see my college entrance exam score. I simply clicked on the confirm button. Then, a huge 0 appeared before everyone's eyes. Seeing this 0, I wasn't the least bit surprised. After all, in my previous life, Tiffany had handed in blank papers for every subject. At this moment, Tiffany was still feigning astonishment, covering her mouth with her hand. she deliberately said, "Molly, how could you have no grades? Were you caught cheating, or is it that your previous top student persona was all fake? Have all your exam results over the years been copied?" Tiffany is determined to nail me to the pillar of historical shame. Of course, I can't let her down. I feigned shock, covering my mouth with my hand. How could this be? It's impossible. I answered every single question. There must be a mistake with the exam paper. I demand to check the exam paper. I demand to check the exam paper. In just an instant, my father's face darkened. He grabbed my shoulders and shoved me to the ground. A daughter who had brought him such shame was nothing but a discarded pawn. Useless thing. Get out of here, my dad yelled at me angrily, then immediately turned his head and looked at Tiffany with great tenderness. "Tiffany, hurry, check your score. How many points did you get?" At this moment, Tiffany was beaming with pride. She haughtily placed all 10 fingers on the keyboard and swiftly entered her student ID. In no time, another eye-catching number appeared on the big screen, 250. Tiffany scored 250 points, no more, no less. This score truly suits her. By this point, Tiffany was completely numb. She also panicked and muttered to herself, "How is this possible? How could it only be 250 points? It can't be this. I couldn't have scored so low." At this moment, I was still sitting on the ground, crying. I kept muttering to myself, "It must be a mistake in grading the papers. There must be something wrong. I performed really well." Tiffany heard my words, and she also had a sudden inspiration. "That's right, there must be something wrong with the papers. It must be that the teacher grading the papers this year made a mistake and messed up all our scores." If I were the only one saying this, my dad would think I'm crazy. But since Tiffany is saying the same thing, there's no way my dad could believe that both of his daughters have gone crazy. Hearing Tiffany's words, my dad also firmly believed that it must have been the teacher grading the papers who made the mistake. Tiffany forced my dad to call the Education Bureau to check her own score. She wanted to see her own exam paper. Upon hearing this, my dad ignored the guests who were whispering among themselves. He immediately took out his phone and started looking for contacts everywhere. He wanted to find reporters and even reach out to television stations, determined to get to the bottom of Tiffany's and my scores. A grand banquet meant to recognize a daughter didn't earn my dad any respect. Instead, it even made him a laughingstock in high society. At that moment, I once again heard Tiffany conversing with the system. The system told Tiffany, "Now that the college entrance exam results are out, your scores won't get you into Yale University. The score exchange mission has failed. The system will deduct 20 years of your lifespan, along with your youth and beauty." It turns out that Tiffany's punishment is so light. In my past life, she stole my scores and altered my fate. She even shortened my lifespan by 60 years, but when it comes to her lifespan is only reduced by 20 years. Tiffany is still arguing with the system. It must be a problem with the grading teacher. They must have mixed up our exam papers. Don't worry, as long as we communicate with the Education Bureau and request to review my exam paper, we can definitely retrieve my real score, and I can still get into Yale University. Yeah, how could the system determine Tiffany's failure so quickly? After all, the big gift I prepared for Tiffany hasn't been fully delivered yet. A few more days passed, because my dad called the Education Bureau and even chose to report it to the police. And Tiffany also started a live stream online, angrily denouncing that her score had been tampered with. Therefore, an announcement was quickly issued from the authorities. They said they would publicly release Tiffany's exam paper online to prove the invigilator's innocence. As for me, I personally will also make a call to the Education Bureau. I'll say that I intentionally handed in a blank paper and that I slept during the exam. My grades are not an issue. A live broadcast across the internet and publicly sharing exam papers, such a glorious thing that brings honor to the ancestors. I'm not one to seek the limelight, so I'd rather not participate. 3 days later, Tiffany, while holding her phone high and live streaming, took Willa and my dad to the Education Bureau to check her exam papers. At the same time, all of Tiffany's exam papers were also made public online. Each of Tiffany's exam papers had carefully written answers. It's just that those answers were a bit disappointing. For the math essay question, besides writing the word solution, I also drew a big turtle. On the chemistry exam, all the chemical equations were actually written in English. When put together, it reads, "I am bitch." For the English multiple choice questions, I chose F for all of them. On the physics exam, I drew crayon Shinchan. The most astonishing thing, of course, was the Chinese language exam paper. Tiffany's Chinese essay was titled, "My Mother, the Mistress." This essay was truly written with deep emotion. It depicted the various details between Willa and my father, how my father looked down on his rural girlfriend for being poor and favored the rich, how the Willa family was so snobbish, insisting on exchanging their daughter for a bride price of 200,000 yuan, and how Willa and my father secretly carried on an affair after their marriage. The detailed descriptions were so deeply moving, yet so utterly disgraceful, including Willa bringing Tiffany into my family's villa to work as a nanny for us, as well as Willa sneaking into my mother's pajamas in the middle of the night, wanting to play something exciting with my dad, and insisting on seeing it through to the end. As soon as this college entrance exam essay was published online, it instantly caused an uproar. Willa's name quickly became famous among the entire population, and the great love between my dad and Willa, it was even adapted by some online writers into a short script and filmed as a 100-episode dramatic mini-series, which was streamed for free across the internet. Tiffany was desperately trying to check her scores. Little did she know, she would uncover a shocking scandal about herself. At the same time, during this period, my mom had also gathered a lot of evidence of the affair between my dad and Willa. Most importantly, Tiffany is indeed my father's biological daughter. Their paternity test showed a genetic match rate as high as 98%. Willa did a decent job in this regard. At least she didn't make my father wear a green hat and raise someone else's bastard child. My mother submitted this evidence to the relevant authorities, along with Tiffany's college entrance exam essay. It was the best solid proof. Meanwhile, my mother and father were fiercely fighting their divorce lawsuit. On the other end, because Tiffany failed to complete the system task, she seemed to have contracted some strange and serious illness. Aging over 20 years overnight, her originally tender, collagen-rich little face became aged and withered in just one night. Tiffany's face was covered in wrinkles, and her hair turned gray. At this moment, she lost her beauty. Without her youth, Tiffany instantly transformed into a middle-aged woman in her 40s. Plus, there's her viral college entrance exam essay. Overnight, Tiffany became the biggest joke on the entire internet. On the day my dad and mom's divorce case went to court, Tiffany actually had the nerve to tag along with my dad, shamelessly showing up as well. With so much evidence in my mother's hands, my father had no choice but to divorce. The only reason he participated in this lawsuit was to fight for a larger share of the marital property. At the entrance of the public security, procuratorate, and court offices, Tiffany was still proudly showing off to me. "Molly, don't think you've won against me. As long as today passes, my dad and your mom will get divorced. My dad said he will marry my mom right away. From now on, the position of the eldest daughter of the Lin family will be mine." I shrugged my shoulders and smiled calmly. My dad and Willa are a perfect match, made in heaven. I wish this scumbag and this bitch would be stuck together for life. At this moment, Tiffany was still screaming like a madwoman. "Molly, what are you so arrogant about? I may have only scored 250 points on the exam this year, but at least with this score, I can get into a junior college or a technical school, and you got a big fat zero. Even if you went to roast sweet potatoes at the school gate, no one would want you, would they?" Seeing Tiffany's furious expression, I raised an eyebrow slightly. "Tiffany, how does it feel to score 250 points? Did you take a good look at the essay I wrote? This is what happens to those who try to steal from me. Your mistress mother is truly touching, isn't she?" At this moment, Tiffany finally came to her senses. "Molly, you set me up. Do you know about the grade swapping thing?" I said. "It's just the grade swapping system, right?" "Of course I know. That's why I deliberately gave you this big gift." Upon hearing this, Tiffany was still gritting her teeth and stubbornly insisting, "So what if you found out? I've already asked the teachers and administrators at the school. You never had a guaranteed admission, you ruined my reputation, and I'll make sure you never get to study again." In the end, I still won. Only then did I pull out a few documents from my backpack and hand them to Tiffany. These documents include my IELTS scores and some of the procedures I went through for studying abroad. I said, "Tiffany, you really are a fool. You don't really think my goal is only Yale University, do you?" Let me tell you, long before the college entrance exam, I had already been accepted by Stanford University abroad. The admission letter is at the embassy. Gold shines wherever it goes, and fools, no matter when, are always equally foolish. As I spoke, I gathered these documents, waiting only for the verdict inside to conclude. After all, I've already discussed it with my mom. When school starts, I'll have my mom accompany me abroad. My mom is getting older. After the divorce, she took half of the marital assets. that money is enough for her to live comfortably for the rest of her life. As for the struggles from now on, they'll naturally be up to me. After the trial, my dad and my mom officially got divorced. The family villa and the factory all went to my dad. My mom received tens of millions in cash, along with some jewelry and other valuables. The property was divided in a 4-6 ratio, with my dad getting 4 parts and my mom getting 6. It is said that my father had an affair during his marriage and even had an illegitimate daughter. However, most of their assets were acquired jointly after marriage. The law does not support agreements that force one party to leave with nothing. After my father and mother divorced, my mother and I moved abroad to focus on my studies. Willa, as she wished, married my father, and Tiffany was finally recognized as part of the family. It's just that my father married Willa, certainly not out of any kind of love, rather, it's because Tiffany and Willa still hold value for him to exploit. In the business world, if there are no legitimate means of profiting, then women can also serve as a useful form of transaction. Although Willa is nearly 50, she still retains a certain charm. Although Tiffany aged overnight, at least she was still a woman. In this lifetime, my father still gave Tiffany to that super-masculine old pervert, and as a package deal, he even threw in Willa as a bonus. The old pervert found Tiffany too ugly and didn't marry her. Instead, he directly locked her and Willa, mother and daughter, in the basement. In that basement, dark and damp, with iron chains and countless instruments of torture. It was enough for Willa and Tiffany to suffer in agony for many years. My father had no talent for business, and his social skills were average, but by relying on those improper means, he could barely keep the factory afloat and avoid starving. Then, about another 3 years or so passed. One day, I received a call from back home while I was abroad. The call was from the Public Security Department. The police officer on the other end of the line told me that my father had been stabbed to death in his own villa. The person who stabbed my father was none other than Willa's ex-husband, a man named Bob. Bob had just been released from prison after serving a 10-year sentence when he saw his wife and child trending on the news. For so many years, Bob had always believed that Tiffany was his own daughter. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Willa, that old hag, would continue to have an affair with his father even after marrying him. What's more, even Tiffany turned out to be his father's flesh and blood. Bob was an extreme character. He had been lurking near my house for over a week. Finally, one day, taking advantage of the housekeeper's day off, Bob broke into our family villa overnight, armed with a steel knife. He tortured my father for a full day and night. He severed the tendons in my father's hands and feet, slicing off pieces of his flesh one cut at a time. It is said that my father died quite tragically. When the police found his body, all that remained of him was a stark white skeleton. The police also informed me that Willa and Tiffany had died as well. Because Willa was older and Tiffany also looked aged and unattractive, the old pervert showed them no mercy, tormenting them in various ways every day. In less than a year, the old pervert had tortured these two to death. Because Tiffany and Willa died before my father. After my father's death, my grandparents had already passed away. So I became the sole heir to my father's estate. The police contacted me, firstly to have me return to the country to identify the bodies, secondly, regarding some of my father's inheritance. I needed to come back personally to claim it. After all the twists and turns, what was meant to be mine ultimately all came back to me. 3 years later, my mother and I boarded the plane back to our home country. This time, I truly reclaimed everything that belonged to me, after hearing the 2 stories above. What are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.